Hello, everyone. This is Waking Up with Wesley, and I'm Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. For this Friday edition on Friday the 16th, 2025, we're going to be talking about how the heat is going to continue right on into the weekend with no relief in sight in the short term. However, if you've been watching our forecast, we have been tracking toward next week, maybe a sign of some relief in the form of a cool front. We'll take a closer look at that. Plus, we'll take a check on the tropics as we inch closer to the start of hurricane season officially beginning next month. So without further ado, let's get right to the information. So first of all, check out this time lapse this morning showing the clouds rolling across Biloxi's skyline, as well as some sunshine peeking through. This morning's sun came up right after 6 a.m. and it won't go down till about 7:44 p.m. as our days naturally get longer and longer as we move away from the short days of winter toward the long days of summer. And of course, that add daylight is one of the reasons why things keep getting a little bit hotter. You might remember earlier this week it was pretty comfortable, but at this point in time we still see this heat ridge, this high pressure ridge located nearby, and that's why our temperatures are still pretty elevated. Depending on where you are, it could be a little hotter than elsewhere. Do you have our First Alert weather app on your mobile device? Well, we got two devices for you. One on the right set for Gulfport, one on the left set for Wiggins. And if you open your First Alert weather app on your phone and set it to your location, you'll get the hour-by-hour forecast for your South Mississippi location we've customized right here in our weather center at our studios. This is information that us meteorologists are plugging in for you, updating it every day. Meteorologists that live right here with you in South Mississippi and know the weather much better than that kind of generic default weather app on your phone that is probably done by a robot and programmed by people that live near the nation's capital, nowhere near South Mississippi. Anyway, that's why it's the app I use when I want to know the weather in South Mississippi. I'm opening the First Alert weather app, and you can see the temperatures will get into the upper 80s by noon today in a place like Wiggins. So getting to 90 by 1 p.m. in a place like Wiggins. If we fast forward to the afternoon, you'll notice we never really hit 90 for coastal areas like Gulfport, Biloxi. We're probably going to be in the mid to upper 80s, but it will still feel hot. Even though the temperature is 86 in Gulfport, temperature is hotter in Wiggins, 91. Both of those places will actually have a heat index in the mid 90s at that time because of all the humidity making it feel hotter. So if you have any afternoon plans for Friday afternoon, maybe avoid spending a whole lot of time outside between like noon and 4 p.m. I think after that we'll see some improvement as the temperatures start to creep back down thanks to the sunset. And before you know it, it becomes a bit more comfortable to spend time outdoors, probably around that 6, 7, and 8 o'clock time frame, around that sunset time frame. So here's a map representation of all of those high temperatures in the area. And you can see that, for example, places down south of I-10, like Long Beach, we'll see a high temperature in the mid to upper 80s today, 86. But someone to the north of I-10, farther away from the relatively cooler waters, Diamond Head, maybe a high of 89 today. Dido, a high of 90 today. So it really makes a difference. If you're closer to the waters, that kind of helps fight off some of the daytime heat. A place like Biloxi that's surrounded on multiple sides by water, the high there might only be 84, 85 today. Ocean Springs also pretty close there at around a high of 85, 86. But then you creep north of I-10, Woolmarket 87, Saussure 90, LaRue 89 or 90, Van Cleve 88, 89. So you see those numbers get hotter and hotter. This is typical of our kind of microclimate here along the Mississippi coast, and it's what we saw the last few days. It's exactly what we are going to see the next few days. Pearl River, Stone, and George counties, you've been seeing some 90s. This will continue each day right on into the weekend as we stay in this above normal temperature pattern. Now, like I said, maybe some sign of relief in sight. Before we get to that, I do want to mention the heat index, because when I walked in this morning and I checked the heat index from yesterday, y'all, the heat index in Perkinston hit 103. I don't think you heard me. The heat index in Perkinston hit 103 yesterday afternoon at around 1 or 2 p.m. So that just goes to show you what's possible. And I do think that in a few spots we will get the heat index in the triple digits, even though most areas probably get the heat index in the mid 90s. Some spots could briefly pop up upwards of that, getting to those lower triple digits. But like I said, maybe some sign of relief in the long range. While there's not any change now through the weekend, you can see that dew point trending downward as we go to the second half of next week. So staying very muggy Friday and Saturday and Sunday and next Monday and next Tuesday. But around next Wednesday or next Thursday, that decrease as we track a cool front. Now look, it's going to be late May by then. I'm skeptical of cool fronts this late into the spring season. We'll see what happens if this one actually makes it here, but this is at least a couple of days in a row where computer models are showing some consistency in this. So maybe it's worth, more than just a grain of salt. This could be something that actually happens. As we go to next Wednesday, some rain chances with that front. And then next Thursday, some drier high pressure moving in with a drop in the humidity for next Thursday. And that could set the stage for a cooler morning. That's the reason why our mornings are so warm, because it's so muggy. Muggy air does not allow for the morning temperature to drop, but dry air does. And so when we get to next Thursday morning, look at these temperatures that you could be waking up to. Maybe you could wake up to a cool 62, maybe even some upper 50s, not out of the question, for some spots, some of the mornings late next week. We do have the 10-day forecast that I do want to pop up. Let's take a look at that. It shows both on the coast and the inland areas as we get toward next week. And you'll notice that, okay, Thursday morning it shows 62. That's the map we were just looking at for places like Wiggins. But then look at Friday morning, 59. So, I mean, that's almost, long sleeve territory for some areas that are north of I-10 for late next week. Now, this is not going to last forever, as it probably is hard to do so. We're so far away from winter. You don't get many cool snaps this close to summer. Summer starts next month on the calendar. So as you can see, that's one more, we can count them. One morning, second morning is Friday, third morning is Saturday, and then that's almost kind of it. By the time we get to next Sunday morning, Sunday the 25th May, that will probably already begin, back to the mild mornings, not as cool. So you get about 2 or 3 mornings out of this. That was inland. On the coast, for places that are closer to the beach, closer to south of I-10, places like Waveland and Pascagoula, maybe you get to 66 next Thursday morning, 64 next Friday morning, and then it's kind of already running out back to the 70s in the mornings by next Sunday. So about 2 or 3 mornings of this in South Mississippi, but hey, we'll take it. Any nice break from the humidity is welcome. As we know, once we get to the summer season, it is going to be a long time before you get more of those breaks. So we did talk about tropics at the beginning of this video, and we are going to touch on some of that right now. So first of all, hurricane season does not officially begin until June 1st. But that's getting closer and closer, inching closer and closer each day here. So at this point in time, it's less than 3 weeks away from the present date. Present day is May 16th. So yeah, it's getting there. And as we take a look at the tropics, first of all, let me remind you last year. Many of you, do you remember last hurricane season? You're probably remembering, oh yeah, last year was nice. We didn't get that many storms. And on the Mississippi coast, maybe you're right, but the rest of the Gulf Coast, I don't know. It was kind of busy. Can you count the storms? It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 named storms in the Gulf last year. And a number of them made landfalls. Okay, Rafael didn't make a landfall in November, but Chris and Alberto made a summer landfall in Mexico. We also saw Beryl make a July landfall in Texas. Francine made a September landfall in Louisiana. And then Florida got hit by 3 storms last year. Helene in September, Debbie in August, and Milton in October. So the numbers tell the whole story that it was definitely a busy year for the Gulf last year in hurricane season 2024. And you're looking at all of the named systems from last year. You remember, like I said, Francine was a storm that hit Louisiana. Maybe South Mississippi saw some impacts from that. It was a Category 2 based on this information and made a landfall probably around that September 11 timeframe of last year. See some of those stronger storms. Beryl was a Category 5. It didn't hit Texas as a 5, it hit Texas as a 1, but it did reach 5 earlier in its lifespan, a long lifespan for that one. Milton was a weird wrong-way storm in the Gulf that moved from the Bay of Campeche toward the west coast of Florida in October. And then Raphael kind of gave us a little late season scare as it was moving toward the Gulf, but it actually fell apart before making a landfall in the Gulf. Here you can see this year's names. These are the names that are available for any storm that forms in the year 2025. You've got Andrea, Barry, Chantal, Dexter, Aaron, Fernan, Gabrielle, Umberto, Imelda, Jerry, Karen, Lorenzo, Melissa, Nestor, Olga, Pablo, Rebecca, Sebastian, Tanya, Van, and Wendy. And every time we show the list of names, someone always asks, well, what happens when we run out of names? And yeah, that has actually happened in a couple of years over the past decade. The old rule used to be we would break out the Greek letters, but we don't do that anymore. They discontinued using Greek letters and when you run out of the regular names. And now instead, there's actually this supplemental or list of extra names that we will go into. And let me fix this information here because I see that our banner is running into itself. So we'll scoot that on over. Okay, I don't know why it's going to go so slowly. We'll do it a little bit more quickly. So yeah, anyway, this is the list of extra names for the Atlantic Basin. In case we get past W, you probably will never see any of these names, hopefully. But in case this year makes it past W, you can see all of those names there. Adria, Braylon, Caridad, Deshawn, Emery, Foster, Gemma, Heath, Isla, Jacobus, Kinsey, Lucio, Michaela, Nolan, Orlando, Pax, Ronan, Sophie, Tayshawn, Viviana, and Will. So probably never going to see any of those. By the way, if the ones on the 2025 list look familiar to you, here's a bunch of names, right? So many names you don't know even what to do. But if the ones on this year's list look familiar to you, it's because these lists are actually recycled every 6 years. So the 2025 list was actually used back in 2019, and it will be used again in 2031 or 2031. So you'll see most of these names again 6 years from now, and that's kind of the way the cycle goes. Last year, 2024, is going to be recycled in 2030. But some names are not going to be there. Remember, we had a Milton last year, but that thing got retired. So Milton replaced by Miguel. Francine didn't get retired, so you'll hear that name again in 2030, even though you heard it last year. I think there was another one that got retired from last year. But either way, definitely that repeat of names is something to get used to. Hey, one other thing to get used to, no activity in the tropics. So that's good news from the National Hurricane Center on this second day of their daily tropical weather outlooks, which will continue each day through November 30th. They're going to keep giving us a check on the tropics, telling us if there's a chance of a storm to form. And today, second day in a row, that they're saying no, nothing out there today and nothing out there for the next 7 days. We still keep a check on those water temperatures, since anytime the water temperature is 80 degrees or hotter, that does support tropical development. And the Gulf continues to warm, so we'll see those warm temperatures across the Atlantic Basin as we get closer to the summer season. However, the whole Atlantic Basin is still a very hostile environment that doesn't support tropical development for the wind shear. Wind shear, that's the change in wind with height. And for many parts of the Atlantic, the winds are screaming fast upstairs in the atmosphere across the Gulf, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic. So that means that if any storm were to try to bubble up and form, those upper level winds would race right across it and basically destroy or cut off the circulation. So that's good news. Hopefully that continues. That's something normal to see early in the hurricane season, but it does start to break down toward the peak of hurricane season, which is usually in September, as this chart shows. So your annual peak of hurricane activity typically occurs in September, but the season does run from June 1st to November 30th, and here we are approaching that peak. So we'll, of course, keep you updated on the latest in the tropics as we go through every day. But fortunately, today, another day that we can just give you that good news that there's nothing to track in the tropics. So that'll pretty much do it for our digital desk update on this Friday. I hope that you have a nice weekend. Find a way to keep your cool with that above normal warmth continuing, although there is a sign of relief at the end of the tunnel, maybe around the second half of next week. We could get to those cooler mornings and less humid afternoons. I've been Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. Thank you so much for waking up with Wesley. Take care.